What if ancient Egypt's goddess Ma'at was about something that was so completely different from Egyptology's standard narrative, or from anything that we would ever imagine? What if Ma'at was part of a story about humanity that is so important ancient Egyptians felt compelled to record that story? Well, the shocker? Ma'at is really about science. About astronomy, to be exact, not mythology, as the standard narrative preaches and insists that we accept. MAAT is about the future of humanity, about all life on Earth. We all know the image, the feather, the scales, the weighing of the heart. It's iconic. A soul being judged, a feather on one side, the heart on the other. But think, can a heart actually weigh the same or less than a feather? Or is something else going on here? What you're being shown is a metaphor, a code. And once unlocked, the code will show you how ancient Egyptians recorded the science of space weather, how Earth is protected. That is the real story of Ma'at, the goddess whose wings held up the sky, and whose feather shielded the earth. Hidden in plain sight is Ma'at's true meaning, and it isn't about scales or morality. Ma'at is about Earth's survival, about how that survival depends on the strength of the magnetic field. The ancient Egyptians very cleverly symbolized Ma'at's meaning in her single ostrich feather, her feather of truth, and in her enormous wings. Let's begin with that single ostrich feather. When you look at images of Ma'at, do you find her appearance puzzling? Here's what I mean by that. First is how prominently the feather is placed in her headband, obviously as a way to attract attention. But why an ostrich feather? What's so special about that particular kind of feather? And doesn't it strike you as odd that Ma'at's wings are not ostrich wings, when she's known by and identified with that single ostrich feather? Why switch and give her wings that are obviously not those of an ostrich? Here's the answer that's been overlooked for centuries. Ostrich feathers are really good at trapping and collecting dust. That's why people use them as dusters. The Egyptians used this fact metaphorically to point to Ma'at's true meaning, which was to trap and collect something that was comparable to dust particles. You see, the thing is, ancient Egyptians recorded important information that was outside of their day-to-day lives using analogies, metaphors, fables, and allegories. One of the key characteristics of a fable is anthropomorphism, and ancient Egypt, as we all know, was filled with anthropomorphic gods. The reason for nearly all of ancient Egypt's gods that combined human characteristics with animal ones now becomes plain to see with the understanding of Ma'at. Let's begin with what's behind the metaphor of Ma'at, why the Egyptians created this goddess. It begins with the sun. Our sun is a very active, turbulent star. Even during its so-called calm periods, it is constantly emitting billions of tons of electrically charged subatomic particles, electrons and protons, into the solar wind coming off its corona, sometimes aimed in Earth's direction. In its periods of high activity, the sun routinely blasts out dramatic bursts of powerful energy in the form of solar flares, said to be the most powerful explosions in the solar system, or in immense clouds of those subatomic particles, called coronal mass ejections, or CMEs. Both types of solar expulsions have the potential to directly or indirectly create unimaginable destruction and chaos. Destruction of systems we depend on, destruction of the Earth itself, and destruction of all life on the planet. A portion of Earth's magnetic field extends from inside the Earth out into space for approximately 40,000 miles, where it meets the solar wind and forms a protective shield around the planet. The part of the magnetic field that is out in space is called the magnetosphere. The magnetosphere traps and blocks subatomic particles from reaching the Earth and adversely affecting the field that is inside the Earth, because this is where the real apocalyptic implications lie. The magnetosphere is Earth's protective shield against an apocalypse that could otherwise be triggered by the sun. But how could ancient Egyptians possibly have known any of this? Let me ask you this. How could ancient Egyptians possibly have built the Great Pyramid? Here's a thought. Preconceived, accepted beliefs place a blindfold over our eyes, and that's almost literally, so that we fail to see even things that are very obvious. We look, but we don't see. Egyptology's narrative says that MAAt and other ancient Egyptian gods are mythology. Nothing to see here. And who are we to argue when we're not archaeologists or scholars? Incidentally, mythology in this case is code for nonsense. Curiosity and what it can reveal is often labeled as confirmation bias, conveniently overlooking the fact that confirmation bias is a part of the human condition. It affects scientists, scholars, Egyptologists, and conspiracy theorists equally. Let's see if decoding MAAT's wings actually confirms confirmation bias, or if instead, curiosity gives us the ability to remove the blindfold and see the surprising truth that is right in front of our eyes concerning the goddess MAAT. It's time to decode MAAT's awesome wings. While we now know that MAAT's single ostrich feather provided the first clue that her role is to trap and collect particles, it is her oversized wings that complete the metaphor. MAAT's spectacular, impossible to ignore wings truly give meaning to the term statement making. Question is, exactly what was the statement that they were making? What was the message? You can clearly see that those wings are artificial. They're attached to her arms. They're also posed in ways that suggest deliberate positioning, sometimes outstretched and at other times asymmetrical. Why? Because they weren't meant to depict flight, as in a bird. Have you ever seen a bird hold its wings asymmetrically? The Egyptians used MAAT's wings to illustrate deflection, containment, and shielding. This is how the magnetosphere funnels the subatomic particles away from around the Earth towards the poles. And now that you know this, I bet you can now imagine those actions being carried out in the different positions that MAAT is portrayed holding her wings. This is where the true meaning is fully confirmed. MAAT was the metaphor for the magnetosphere. The real magnetosphere is invisible. In the goddess MAAT, it becomes visible. Now, one part of the anatomy of real bird feathers comes into play in the metaphor in an incredible way. It concerns the structures of stiff bird feathers that are called barbules. These barbules, are the secondary branches of the feather's main stem, and they have microscopic hooks on them that lock together to form a tight barrier. And this formidable barrier is able to block out wind and water from the bird's body, just as the magnetosphere, aka MAAT, blocks out subatomic particles and radiation from the sun. When you look at an ostrich's wings, do they give you the impression of being the kind of feathers that would act as great barriers against wind and rain? I'm going to bet the answer is no. And that's for a good reason. Because unlike the firmly structured kind of feathers that other birds have, ostrich feathers do not have those interlocking barbules. and the lack of that hook and loop structure makes the ostrich feather appear loose and shaggy, which is what makes them so good at picking up dust, and not so much at blocking things out. The inescapable fact is that there appears to have been definite and purposeful thought behind the creation of the goddess Ma'at. In Egyptian mythology, Ma'at was said to hold back chaos. In reality, the magnetosphere performs exactly that role. It is our planetary defense system against not just solar chaos, but also against a return to a state of chaos, as the ancient Egyptians understood that state to be. I'll explain what that means in a moment. The majority of the time, the magnetosphere does a good job of protecting Earth and the atmosphere. However, some CMEs do manage to breach this barrier. And when the breach happens, they become visible as the aurora borealis or northern lights, and then there's a southern lights which are called the aurora australis. However, those two enchanting light shows are the only good things about breaches to the magnetosphere, because the subatomic particles are a constant threat to strip away Earth's atmosphere. And they also cause some serious problems to that portion of the magnetic field inside the Earth. They cause geomagnetic storms, which induce electric currents called telluric currents into the ground. And over time, these currents interfere with the cohesive functioning of the magnetic field, and they also weaken it. Remember, since the magnetosphere is an extension of the magnetic field, when the field is weakened and less effective in the way that it functions, this also applies to the magnetosphere. It's like a double blow. However, if problems in the atmosphere and the magnetic field seem too abstract to care about, then there's a personal angle that will certainly bring it home. Because subatomic particles in CMEs can also severely disrupt those systems that our daily lives run on in our technology-dependent modern age. Things such as satellites, GPS, and other navigation systems. This is a result of CMEs heating up the atmosphere, which can lead to those satellites in low orbit burning up. Back in 2022, after a CME, 40 of Elon Musk's SpaceX Starlink satellites were destroyed. So whether we see Earth's planetary defense as Ma'at, as the ancient Egyptians did, or as the magnetosphere, as modern science does, if our magnetic field is ever overwhelmed, life on Earth would be thrust in immediate and immense danger. How did the ancient Egyptians record this sobering potential? One word: chaos. The concept of chaos is baked into the creation of Ma'at. The Egyptians believed that their goddess was a force that held the creation of the world and the solar system itself together. To them, she was the organizing principle of both Egyptian society and the cosmos. And her primary role was to regulate the stars, to uphold balance and harmony in the cosmos. And she did all these things in order to prevent a return to chaos. To the ancient Egyptians, the term chaos was equivalent to an apocalypse, one that was caused by a natural event. Think about what that suggests for a moment. What did the ancient Egyptians believe could cause a return to this state of nothingness? Well, they feared that chaos would come one day from a powerful strike on the magnetosphere that Ma'at would not be able to prevent or to cope with. And they saw this strike occurring at a particular point in time in Earth's history. This point in time is known to us as the Age of Aquarius. And this has absolutely nothing to do with either astrology or horoscopes. It is about astronomy and the counting down of astrological ages. The ancient Egyptians feared that at some time during the Age of Aquarius, one of these CMEs would cause chaos. This is information that is critical for humanity's future, for our future. That record Ancient Egypt's story of the snake is fully explained over the course of several videos. MAAt, as the magnetic field, and magnetosphere was a central part of that story. And the explanation of MAAt's metaphor has just been laid out for you in this video. Before I wrap this up, there's something that I'd really like to know. Tell me, when you decided to watch the video, did you already suspect that MAAt had a much different meaning than what we've been told by scholars and Egyptologists? Did you, for example, have any idea that MAAt was about the magnetosphere? Let me know in the comments below. There are many more subjects on the Decoded list as upcoming videos on this Ancient Egypt Decoded channel. Not all of them are about Egypt's deities. Subjects of upcoming videos include the meaning of the Giza Sphinx, which is mind-blowing, and the proof that Egyptians were the first to describe the atom. These are just two on a very long list. So, see you in the next video, and thanks for watching.